Hello and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel. If you are returning, thank you as always for being here. I have a compilation video today. This is all of the Valentines DIYs that I've created in 2023. So let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting.
DIY number 1.
For this project, I have a piece of wood. This is just a scrap from my stash. It's a 1x2 that I picked up at the Home Depot a while back, and I am just gonna just checking the length of it there. It's about 5 inches. So I'm gonna cut that first piece 5 inches, and then I'm gonna cut a second piece about a 1/2 inch longer, so about 5.5 inches. And you might have seen that there was some black ink, like a stamp that they put on the wood. So I'm gonna sand all of my ends to make sure that they can stand up properly on their own. And then I'll also sand off that black ink in just a moment. And now I had that other piece, and it occurred to me when I started trying to sand this, I was like, oh, I wonder if that other piece will work. It would if I cut it again, and I didn't feel like cutting down another piece. So I'd rather keep that in my stash in case I need it for something else. So I sanded that all down, and once I had it the way I wanted it, I'm just making sure that they're going to stand up next to each other nice and tall without leaning away from each other, because I want these to be kind of snug against each other. And now I have from the Dollar Tree these wooden stickers. I'm going to paint this one little heart white. You can see it. In the past, I clearly have painted some of these hearts red, but this one I want white. So I'm going to paint that and set it aside to dry. And now I've got my other 2 pieces. This is Imperial Red that I'm using again. And I'm going to grab a baby wipe, and I'm going to try to do a red wash, so to speak. But this red is highly, highly pigmented. So it was going on really dark, which is fine and good. It was just a little bit of this went a long way. So just trying to get this on here without making a complete mess of my fingers. And once I had it covered, I'm going to open up. You're going to see me flip the baby wipe here, and I'm just going over it to kind of try to remove some of that excess paint so that it's more of a wash than a complete like thick paint job. Hopefully I'm making sense. Now this pink is a pale pink. I had blended, I think it's called Victorian. The pink that I have in my stash, it's also by Home Decor. It's a little darker. And I had blended this a while back. This has been sitting in my stash. I was really happy to see it hadn't dried out. I had just added some water back into it to get it to the consistency that I want. And I'm doing a wash with this as well with a new baby wipe. I would say this is probably about the color of ballet slipper. I don't have ballet slipper, so I'm not sure, but you can mix paints to whatever color, tone, whatever it is that makes your heart happy. So there's really unlimited potential with the various paint colors you can come up with. So now I have my jute cord. I had picked this up a while back from Walmart. I'm gonna lay these down now. Notice I kept those with the base really, I didn't want it to move, right? I want to make sure this is going to be able to stand up again once I set it back down. So if you're going to pick it up and lay it down to work with it the way that I did, you just want to make sure that it doesn't slide at all, that the bottom stays lined up. And so I just wrapped my jute cord around there a few times. As you saw, I had secured it with a little bit of hot glue at the start, and now I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue there in the center. I'm doing all of my ends in the center here because I'm going to be covering that up with our little white heart that is now dry. So I'm tucking that on there, and it was kind of like falling forward, so to speak. So I'm going to grab my glue gun again in a second and tuck some hot glue. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of out of frame there, but I just put some hot glue behind it along the jute cord, and I am going to press it down. I keep blowing on it, which is why I keep pulling it out of frame, trying to get it to cool. And then also while I was doing that, I noticed that my heart, the edges of it weren't all white. At the time, I had not intended to make them white, but I noticed that I had some paint that went over the one edge, so Yeah. Coming back in with a little tiny paintbrush, I do recommend doing this before you put it on your project because I'm having to try not to get it on the jute cord here. I think I got a little teeny bit on there, but it was fine. It was really good. And this ended up turning out so cute. All right, once I have that done, I have a couple of wooden beads that I'm going to place on the top. These are going to be their little heads. I saw this on, I think it was on Pinterest. That's what inspired me to do this. So mine's a little bit different, but just added some hot glue in there, and I'm going to secure their little heads. And now when I did this, I'm like, you know what? But I don't like that hole on the top. The hole was really bothering me. And so I could leave it like this and then let it be all done, but I didn't like the holes. So what I'm going to do is grab my jute cord again. I'm putting some hot glue down inside that little hole, and I'm going to push my little jute cord down inside there. I'm kind of twisting it to help get it inside of there and get it secured. I'm going to cut off a length of that. I would say it was probably 6 or 8 inches that I cut for this particular one. And I'm just going to wrap it around the top of her little head. We're going to create some hair here. And I wrapped it a few times until I got it to where I thought it was low enough. And then I'm going to create like a little ponytail. And I was trying to figure out how best to do the ponytail. You can see me anchoring it down with some more hot glue here. And finally, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to tie a little knot in my jute cord here. So I'm going to tie a regular little simple knot here and secure it down close to the bead, so close to her head. Just getting that tight. And then I'm going to grab my hot glue again and put a little bit of... Sorry guys, the dogs are barking. I think Alina just got home from work. But just putting some hot glue there to secure it so it stays flat there. And now I am going to unravel the end of that jute cord and just kind of get it frayed to create her little hair. And just being gentle here because I don't want to break all of the little fibers, and just pulling all of that apart to create, again, her little hair. And now we have squeaky doors in the background, so I apologize for the background noise. But I'm gonna go ahead and get all of that together and trying to get it to lay kind of a little bit flat. It was kind of sticking straight out there for a little bit. So pulling that down and gonna trim off the ends, and now she's got her little ponytail, but again, it was kind of sticking straight out. So I'm gonna use a little bit more hot glue here in a second, just to get it to lay a little bit more like I want it. So teeny tiny bit of hot glue there, laying those fibers down a little bit, and then she'll be set. So doing the same thing with his little head, I'm gonna tuck some jute cord down inside of there, and using a little skewer from another project to tuck it down inside, and then I'll wrap it around his little head as well. For his, clearly we're not making him a ponytail, so I didn't need quite as much jute cord. I cut off maybe a 4 to 5 inch length of it. And I'm just gonna wrap this around and around until I get that all situated. And he's got a little head of hair as well, using a little bit of hot glue. I do have my hot glue on my low setting so that I am less likely to burn myself. You still want to be careful even when it's on the low setting. But I work with this a lot, and I'm usually okay with the low setting, me personally, and I'm just using my fingernails to kind of get the excess glue out of there. I am still being very careful because I can still burn myself on the low setting, just not nearly as badly as with the high setting. So I'm really enjoying the lower setting because it also cools faster and I can work with it a little bit faster. So just trimmed off some of those excess fibers that were sticking out, and that's it. And I think this is so sweet.
DIY number 2.
All right, I have a bunch of yarn and some leftover foam core board that I'm going to be working with for this. I grabbed out my ruler and I'm going to be measuring off, I think I did this at about 6 inches. Now you can make this as tall and as wide as you would like. I just wanted to do it 6 inches. And I was making my letter, I'm creating letters here, block letters. So I wanted them about 6 inches tall, and I'm going to make them about 4 inches wide, with the letters being about an inch and a half thick. So creating block letters, I was just making sure that it was the same thickness all the way down there. I'm creating an L, and then I will go ahead and do an O. Now, because they're block letters, I'm also just making sure I'm measuring them all off the same. But because they're block letters, I can run my letters right up against each other here because I'm going to be cutting them out, and that way I'm not wasting any of the foam core board either. Now, once I had my L and my O done, I'm not going to show you all of that, but I'm going to show you how I did my V. So I measured an inch and a half over at the top there. Then I, at the bottom, also measured over an inch and a half. Okay. And now I'm going to keep measuring an inch and a half apparently just to get all of my markings ready. So everything is an inch and a half because my letters are an inch and a half wide. So I'm marking everything an inch and a half. And then I'm going to be using my ruler at an angle from the top corner of the O down to that first inch and a half mark. And then I will do the same thing on the opposite side. And then in between there, I am going to make sure I'm at the same angle. So from the other marking an inch and a half in down to my inch and a half mark down the bottom from the other side. Hopefully, a picture speaks 1,000 words, hopefully, or 1,000,000 words. Hopefully you're understanding what I'm saying. Now, pencil's awesome because if you mess it up, you can go ahead and fix it, right? I had my middle part of my E too short there, so I just adjusted it. So now I've got this out on my self-healing mat, and I am just going to cut it all out with my razor blade. I like to score it just a little bit with my ruler, and then I go back over it because I find that I make fewer errors if I do it that way. I find personally, if I try to score through the entire thing all at once, I end up moving away from my ruler and I just end up making a mess of things. So anyway, once I have them all cut out, that's when it's time for my yarn. And I have a white yarn that I think I got that from Michael's a really long time ago. It's been on my stash for a while. The pink yarn and the gray yarn are both from the Dollar Tree. And I'm using some hot glue along the edge of the foam core. This is another reason why I like using the hot glue on the low setting, because it doesn't melt the foam core in the center there the way that it will when it's on the high setting. So it just makes it a little bit easier to work with this project. So I'm pretty much wrapping the yarn back and forth across the top there to hide the foam core board. Excuse me. And now I am going to go ahead and wrap this around and around and around my letter. I'm just making sure that I'm anchoring it with some hot glue towards the top so that it's not going to come undone. It's not going to slide up off the top over what I've got going on there. And then I'll be able to start wrapping it without the need for additional glue. Just making sure that I've got the top nice and secure. So I will just continue to wrap that around and around, making sure that all of the foam core board is completely covered and hidden. And I'll work my way down the letter. So once I get to about what I'm considering a third of the way through my entire project, because I'm going to have these letters stacked on top of each other, I'm trimming off the white yarn. I'll go ahead and anchor that with a little bit of hot glue. It doesn't need a lot, just a little bit. Then I'll put some more down for the next color. I'm going to go with pink next. It's kind of like a dusty rose, I'm going to call it. And then I'll start wrapping from there. And here I don't need a lot of hot glue because the white yarn is going to keep that in place. Now when I get down to the bottom, I'm going to need a lot more hot glue. Just as I did at the top, I'm going to need to make sure I'm securing the bottom. So right here, as I get to the L, the part of the L that sticks out, I'm going to do the same thing I did at the top. I'm going to use some hot glue here. I'm going to wrap my yarn, not wrap it, but lay my yarn down one end, anchor it down that end, and then I'm going to wrap it back up the other way so that it's completely covering the foam core. Because this particular yarn, now if you use a thicker yarn, you won't need to go back and forth like that. But because this yarn is pretty skinny, it's called it's a worsted weight yarn. So because it is skinny, it is not wide enough to cover the foam core board in one fell swoop. That's why I'm having to go back and forth over that. If you use a wider yarn, then you won't have that same issue. And a wider yarn might actually be really fun and pretty. But I'm gonna continue to wrap my way all the way down, and then I will anchor it with some hot glue. So once I have that all anchored, I'm going to go back and forth across the bottom the same way that I did at the top, and just make sure that the entire thing is completely covered and hidden. So you can see me anchoring it down. And I probably could have edited some of this out, but just in case you want to see this again, I'm going to run hot glue right along the foam core there. And then I'm a little out of frame, of course, now, but I'm going to wrap it back and forth along the bottom there just to make sure everything is nice and hidden. And then I'll trim it off. I think I do actually end up putting a little bit more hot glue down just to make sure that my end is anchored. Yep, just a little bit there, tucking it down in between the other strands, and I am good with my L. And then when I get to my V, I'm going to start with the Dusty Rose and work my way down the V. First with the Dusty Rose, and then I will be transitioning over to the gray. So I'm going to continue to do the same thing that I did before, and I'm going to be speeding through this in just a minute here, because I know this is probably already getting a little bit old watching me wrap this. But it's giving it kind of an ombre effect. So I did see this on Pinterest, so in completely different colors, but I thought it was so cute, and I was inspired to give it a go. I don't know what that particular piece was made from. I feel like it might have been thicker, but I am making this as a wall hanging, and so I thought the foam core board would work quite nicely. Now, if you are new to my channel, welcome. If you have not already subscribed, I hope that you'll consider doing that and hitting that bell so that you get notified whenever I upload a new video. And if you have been subscribed to my channel, thank you. I sincerely appreciate you. I hope that you all know how much I love hearing from you and all of your comments. And this has been such a wonderful journey, and I'm looking forward to everything that's to come now that we're starting 2023. But as you can see here, I've transitioned over to the gray, and I'm working my way down to that V part. Once I hit that V area, I'm going to stop on the one side, and I'm going to wrap the other part of my V. And once I had that done, I started wrapping around the whole thing. I just continued on. But instead of using the hot glue, I decided I was going to use my double-sided tape from the Dollar Tree for this, because I need to have more going on here. And the reason being that the V, instead of getting wider, obviously it's getting thinner. And as it gets more narrow, the yarn wants to slide, right? So I needed something that was going to grab the yarn and keep it from sliding. With the other letters where there's no angle, all of my other letters have straight lines. There was no, the yarn wasn't going to slide on me. It was all going to be consistent. So now I'm working on the E, clearly. I did end up going too far with the E. Yeah, I ended up going too far, and I had to undo it and and go back. So, but you know what? That happens in crafting sometimes. I also realized that I had started, oh, no, I think it was the O, where I had started with the wrong color, and I ended up having to flip it upside down, which worked out well too. But anyway, here they are all wrapped. And so now I'm going to connect them together. So in order to do that, I'm going to flip them upside down, trying to figure out how I want to piece them together. I grabbed some skewers out of my stash from a project that I did, I think it was last week. And I had pulled these off of some hearts, and so now I'm going to repurpose them. But cutting them down, I'm cutting these at an angle to try to give a sharp end to the part that I'm cutting. So they're pointy. I'm using the pointy part from the skewer, but then also creating another pointy part. And I'm going to kind of jab these into the foam core and do that on both sides so that they kind of all are kind of meshed together here. Now, it was a little bit more challenging than I thought it might be. I ultimately ended up taking out my paper piercing tool and used that to create holes. Highly recommend starting with that because then you won't have to struggle quite as much as I did in the beginning as I was first trying to get this in here. My thought was, well, it's foam core, it's soft and you could pierce it. And I thought that these wooden skewers would be sufficient, but with the hot glue involved and the yarn, I found it easier once I started using my piercing tool. So just a quick little tip on that. I'm getting these all anchored together, making sure that they are a good length so that they're not going to end up going through the other side of the letter, especially with the V, with it being at an angle. I want to make sure that it all stays within the project, right? And got those secured. And then I'm also going to use some smaller pieces to attach the L to the O and the V to the E. And I'll just cut those down and do the same thing. And it was at this point in just a moment that I ended up getting out my piercing tool. For whatever reason, this part was harder. So working on that now, getting this all lined up. And there's the piercing tool you can see. Once I had them all lined up, this was something, you guys. All right, pushing it together. All right, you know, I guess I decided to show you a little bit of the struggle so that you don't ever feel like I am doing things like a whiz, because clearly I had to pull that out a little bit. It got pushed a little too far in, grabbed my pliers, back with the piercing tool. I promise you guys it's coming together here this time. There we go. All right, so now it's all mushed together. Just to make it a little bit more secure, I did come in with some hot glue here in just a second. So on the back side of it, I'm kind of holding it together, securing it with some hot glue just to make sure that it's extra secure and not going to come apart on me. I just used a little bit anywhere I had a seam. Alrighty, now I took 3 strands of the pink yarn. It doesn't really matter which color you use, but I went ahead and I braided it down for 3 separate lengths, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in a second. So I got it to one length and I went ahead and knotted it, and then I'm going to do another knot. I'm going to knot it again after a little bit of a space, and then I'm going to braid it some more. And then I did it a 3rd time. Now, the reason I did it 3 times, I thought I wanted to have a hanger just in the middle between the L and the O, the bases of the L and the O. But then I was thinking, you know what? It might end up leaning forward off the wall. So I figured I better have hooks for the top of the L and the top of the O also as an option. You can do whatever your heart desires. If you want to just put them at the top, I think that's perfectly fine. I did test it out and it does lean forward a little bit when I use just the one in the very middle. It probably also depends on how tight you have your little hanger as well. I imagine that probably makes a difference. So whatever works for you, but I have options here for myself. I did notice also afterwards that I had my V on backwards. And by backwards, I know the V is the same forward and back, but the good side of my yarn was facing the back, but that's all right. It's still super cute. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 3.
All right, I have one of these signs from the Dollar Tree and a stencil that I took out of a pack that you're going to see again a little bit later, but just got it prepped and I'm using mineral chalk paint with a baby wipe. So I am making more of a stain with this as opposed to painting it full on. So, or maybe you might want to call it like a mineral wash, but it's mineral chalk paint by Home Decor. And I'm just going to cover the entire surface with that. Once it's dry, I am taping down my stencil. This is by Plaid. You might even be able to see the Plaid logo there in the top. But cutting a couple of pieces of my little makeup sponges that I love to use for my stenciling, and coming in with Imperial Red. This is also by Home Decor, and just kind of dabbing it along. Now, as I had a little too much paint here and there on my little sponge when I would go to pick up my paint, I just kind of dabbed it off to the side, and then I could pick up some more of that paint as needed. You're going to see a little bit later on a project that I did before this, but I'm showing to you later on. I had a little too much paint on my sponge with one of the stencils, and so you live and learn. So here it is, peeling it all off. That was Adirondack white. Once it was dry, I decided I was going to try to sand it a little bit because it just looked a little too perfect. Now when I did this, it was kind of smudging the paint. Even though it was dry, it was kind of smudging, I guess, the grains of paint. Is that a word? I don't know. Across the surface. So I decided I wasn't going to do any more of that. So there's a little bit of a blur of red and a blur of white there. But I reattached my hanger with the knot at the back, and now I've gone into my floral stash and I've got some lamb's ear here that I'm trying out. I ultimately decided that was a little too big. And then I have some of this, I think this is dogwood. Is that, no, not dogwood. Boxwood. I think this is boxwood. And then some of my lavender picks. So just trying to get an idea of what this might look like. And I decided I wanted to have a bow at the top as well. So I pulled out this really pretty ribbon by Kirkland's. It's from Costco. And I realized I already had made a bow with that during a little Costco ribbon haul / bow tutorial. So I grabbed that bow and I'm going to use it here. And just again, you guys, if you followed me at all for any length of time, you know I'm very visual and I don't like to commit until I have a really good idea of what something is going to look like. So I'm just playing with it here, trying to decide how I want to make this work. I'm going to tuck those ends of my boxwood into the little hanger there, and then I'm going to come in with a whole bunch of hot glue and set my bow down right on top of that. And then once I have that situated and the bow is cool, or the glue is cool, I'm going to grab a couple of pieces of my lavender and tuck that in there as well. I end up having to just trim back that the end of that pick because I had already glued it down, right? I wasn't able to get it tucked in there as far as I might otherwise have. So just getting it to the length that I need it so that I can attach it in there, and I'll tuck it in. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and I'll come back underneath the bow and add some hot glue to it. And I did that on both sides. So then I'll just fluff up my bow, and that's really all there is to this. I think it is super sweet, but let me know what you think of this as well. And yeah.
DIY number 4.
All right, I have a microfiber cloth left over from another project from the Dollar Tree, scarf also left over from another project, also from the Dollar Tree, and this is a piece of fabric also from the Dollar Tree. I went ahead and tried to see if this was going to work. I had a feeling it might not be quite wide enough, and it was not. So I ended up getting another piece of fabric out of my stash that I knew would work. Now, in hindsight, I could have just cut my scarf in half and then used different pieces from the white fabric from the Dollar Tree, but you know what? Hindsight is 2020, and I didn't think of it at the time. It probably would have made the entire project a little bit easier for me, but this worked out just fine. And the reason I am doing this is that the scarf is really sheer, and I don't want you to be able to see through the fabric of the scarf. So I got that all lined up. My fabric is kind of folded over, and so then I just was able to cut right along that fold mark. But the white material is just a single layer. Hopefully that makes sense. But I have everything lined up, and I just folded both pieces in half, trying to find center. And now I'm going to work with my scrap of microfiber cloth to try and figure out which pieces I want to work with here. And I do apologize if you hear any background noise. I am literally sitting in my closet because it's the most kind of insulated area. So we're having some flooring installed downstairs, and it's quite loud, and this is the only time that I have to do the voiceover. So I appreciate your patience with me. You might also hear Sammy's collar rattling because he is here in the closet with me, and he's being a pretty good boy, but yeah, okay. I spoke too soon. But at any rate, thank you for your patience with the background noise. I am getting all of my pieces together here. So now you could certainly create a pattern for this. You guys, I kind of just did it by eye, so to speak. But I'm creating an O, and then I will also be creating an X. So, and then I'm going to be embroidering these, not embroidering, but blanket stitching them onto what will be our pillow. So cutting out my O, I cut out the circle first, and now I will go ahead and cut out the inside of the O. I've got it folded just to try and help make it symmetrical, and try and just keep everything nice and even. So once I've got my O set, I want to make sure my X isn't huge in proportion, compared to my O. So I am now cutting out the fabric a little bit. We're cutting it down a little bit, right? So that it is going to be about the same height as my O. So once I have that trimmed down, I will be able to go ahead and cut the X part out as well. We'll move through this as quickly as we can here. But if you are new to my channel and you have not yet subscribed, thank you, first of all, for being here and for watching. And I hope that you'll consider subscribing, and make sure you hit that bell so that you get notified anytime I upload a new video. I absolutely adore all of my subscribers. I would not be here if it were not for you. So thank you, thank you, thank you for all of the amazing support. So I've got this other piece cut in half. You saw me cutting out kind of a triangle shape. I'm rounding my edges, folded it in half, and cut out another one on that other side to try to start creating our X shape. I'm going to go ahead and fold it in half again, and then I think I folded a fourth time. Yeah, a third time, excuse me. Second time? Oh my goodness, I can't count. But now I have it all cut down. I did go back and trim it down a little bit because I felt like they were too tall for what I'm trying to fit on the pillow here. Once I'm going to have all my seams sewn, I want to make sure that they fit. So here you can see they're going to fit a little bit better. I'm trying to figure out how big my seam will be on the right side so that I can make sure I'm getting these all centered. That was a little bit of a fail on my part, but I was able to fix it later on, so you'll see all of that in a moment. Now, You guys, the struggle was real on this blanket stitch that I wanted to do for the life of me. And usually, I don't do it very often, so I always have to kind of remember how I did it the last time, and I usually can figure it out pretty quickly. When I say that I redid this at least 5 times, it is no exaggeration. So I was getting so frustrated with myself. I finally went on YouTube and found a video that would show me how to do the blanket stitch, because for the life of me, I could not remember. So I finally got myself sorted out, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch all around the O and the X. I still was struggling a little bit even with the video. I just had to keep referencing it. Once I got going, I was good, but I just, for whatever reason, was having a mental block on how to do this stitch. And it's not a difficult stitch, so please don't let my challenges dissuade you from trying this. Clearly, I am not going to be the right person to try to explain or teach you how to do this. I mean, yeah, but there are really great little tutorials on YouTube that are very simple and show you exactly how to do this. But essentially, you kind of come down from the bottom, you come up through, and then you grab the thread in the loop of your stitch so that you can go ahead and make sure you have that kind of L shape going on. And I am sorry because Sammy is like climbing all over me, but you know what? Find a way or make a way. That's what I'm doing today, because I got to get this video published for you guys to see. All right, so now we're settling down, hopefully. All right. But here I've come in a little bit closer to give you a better idea of the stitch. So just working my way all the way around the O. I'll be doing the inside of the O as well. You can see I kind of flipped the thread up, and yeah, this is just a hot mess, you guys. I'm sorry that it's not a better demonstration, but worked my way all the way around the O. And then for the X, I did pin it down, and I do recommend doing that, because when I was working with the O, I did find it was kind of bunching a little bit and puckering in places, because I was just trying to hold it with my hands as I was doing the stitching. Definitely recommend pinning everything down. It'll take you like 30 seconds to pin it, and then it won't move on you. And the X was definitely easier to work with because I wasn't having to compete with the fabric moving it around. So I got that all trimmed as well. And then on the back side, I am just going to anchor it with some knots. I am not going all the way through the fabric. In fact, I was just checking to make sure I hadn't gone all the way through, because I don't want this showing on the other side. So just knotting it a few times, making sure that it's going to be fastened off. Of course, it got all bunched up on me there. So got that straightened out, knotted, and then I'm going to run my needle through some of the stitches that were made kind of in a line. You can kind of see over on the right side where I did that with the O, but drawing it through there just to kind of anchor the tail so that it's less likely to unknot. All right, so we've got this done. Now, I really should have pressed this. I should have ironed it. It's a little bit wrinkly. I did not. I figured, with the fiber fill, putting pressure on it, and over time that the fabric would probably relax. Yeah, the correct way to do it would have been to press it. I did not. So forgive me for that bit of laziness. So I'm going to go him around, and I am pinning the, I've got it obviously inside out, but I'm pinning it all around. The bottom right there, I did leave a big gap on the right so that it was going to be large enough for me to get my hand in. And I'm going to go ahead and continue pinning it all the way around. And then I started to sew it by hand. Now, fortunately, my sewing machine is fixed, so I am going to actually grab my sewing machine in a minute, but I do want you to know that you can, if you don't have a sewing machine, you can still create this project, right? It will take time. I'm using, I think this is called a back stitch, where I kind of overlap my stitches, but it definitely would take quite a bit of time to do it that way. So I pulled out my sewing machine, and I am just going to run it right through the machine. I was a little bit careful with it when I first started working with it because I didn't want to jam it up again. So I was going through and pulling out the pins as I went. But then I figured, you know what, it seemed to be working just fine. So I went ahead and just sewed right over them after that. Pulling it right side out and getting it ready to stuff. And this is where I realized that the seam that I created on the right side of the pillow was not as wide as I had planned for. So my X and my O are way off center. And this was bothering me enough that I decided that I was going to flip it inside out again and sew a new seam on that side. Oh, goodness. Simple project that I made very difficult for myself. So I've decided to kind of check and see how much of a seam I really needed. It was like 2 inches, you guys. So I just put it back through the sewing machine again, sewed off another 2 inch seam, and then I trimmed off the excess fabric. I left probably 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, just so that I didn't get too close to my stitches. And I also cut off the corners. Just make sure you don't get too close to your stitches when you do that. But when you clip the corners like that, it just helps when you flip it right side out, because you don't have a lot of fabric competing with what you're doing, right? So now I'm using a regular fiber fill to stuff my pillow. I got it nice and full, and now I am ready to seal up that opening. So I'm just kind of rolling the fabric into itself to create a seam that is uniform with what has already been sewn. Just pinching it all together, making sure that it's nice and lined up, and pinning it so that it's not going to get away from me. Once I have that all pinned, I can come in and sew it. I think this is called a slip stitch. Forgive me, you guys, because I am a very basic sewer, so I don't really know a lot of the names of the stitches, but I'm essentially coming in between the two pieces of fabric that I'm trying to sew, and I'm grabbing one side, making sure I'm going through both layers of my fabric, so the scarf and the white lining fabric, and then I'm going to the other side and stitching that side to kind of weave them to pull them together, right? So I don't really want my, well, not really, I don't want my stitches to be seen on this. I want them as hidden as possible. So by doing it this way, I am kind of creating an invisible, not invisible, a hidden stitch, so to speak. So I got that all sewn together and I fastened it off the same way I did on the back side, right? With my knot and sliding it through. And that was it. But let me know what you think of the final result.
DIY number 5.
For this project, I have a ceramic heart from the Dollar Tree, and this is infusible ink. Now, I had a feeling it was not going to be sublimatable, if that's the right word, the ceramic heart that is, but I wanted to try it. I was hopeful that I could sublimate on it, and infusible ink is basically sublimation, right? It's just pre-printed for us. So I gave it a shot, and yeah, reminder to put butcher paper underneath your projects, not just on top, but it was a fail. So fortunately, I was able to remove it with some rubbing alcohol and elbow grease. It did take a little bit of effort, but it did completely come off because, again, I think with the ceramic, it's a non-porous surface, so there's nothing for the sublimation or the ink, the infusible ink, to seep into. Which is why I'm able to remove this. It's kind of just sitting on top of the project. So after that, I figured, you know what, once I had it all cleaned off, I was going to try my acrylic paint markers, and you certainly could do this. In fact, I wasn't thrilled with this design that I did. I was still really trying to ruminate in my head. Not thrilled with this heart pattern. This also easily gets wiped away with some rubbing alcohol. Yeah, I was struggling. I thought my next step was going to be to try to just do an abstract pattern on the heart, which you certainly can do. And if you like what I did here, I mean, I'm just doodling, right? Um, but then I had an idea. I pulled out my alcohol inks and I'm gonna go ahead and see what I can do with these on the ceramic. I figure they work really well on glass. Why not ceramic, right? So I got all of them ready. I basically pulled out anything that looked like a purple, a red, or a pink. That's the color palette that I'm going with. So just randomly dropping little bits of the alcohol ink. I'm kind of going one by one and I'm starting with 3 drops each, and then I'll go back and I'll fill it in where I might have holes. So as I was going with this, I'll show you a little bit closer up here. You can see how the ink kind of just pushes itself out of the way. So as you drop a new color on, it's going to expand and kind of push the other colors out of the way and make room for itself. So they don't really blend per se, but they kind of make room for themselves and each other. I don't know how else to describe it. Clearly you can see what's happening here. Now, as I went and as it started to dry, I was starting to get some breakthrough with the white, and I think, and you're going to see that in just a second. I think it's because I had cleaned it off again with the rubbing alcohol, and I hadn't made sure it was completely dry before I started doing that. So here you can see it's kind of breaking down in some areas. And part of me kind of liked it. And then the other part of me was like, it wasn't really the look I was going for. So I came back in with additional ink, same colors as before, just in a random pattern. If it looked like I had too much purple in one spot, I added some red, or if I had too much pink, I would add some more purple, you know. So just trying to do what was making my eye happy. And my goal really was to be covering up all of the white that was showing through. So I just continue to do that. I think I'm going to come back in with some purple here in a second. And yes, I did. I actually even dropped some of it right in the middle of that big pink piece. But here it is when it's all dry. I started to put the hanger on it and I decided, you know what? It's dry, but I don't want it to be able to scrape off. Rubbing alcohol would take this off. If I ever want to clean it, I decided I was going to put a clear coat over top. This is the one I used. You can use whatever you have, and this is it once it was dry with the clear coat, and now it's protected and I don't have to worry about it coming off. I think this looks so cool. So I just folded my parchment paper in half to protect it from any of the alcohol ink that was still on the parchment paper that it might pick up when I flipped it over like that. And now I am re-adding or adding back my little hanger. I'm doing it differently than it had been on originally. Originally, the jute cord went across the front of the heart and then it tied up at the top. But I decided that I just wanted a knot on the front side at either side and not have it go across the heart. Now I did double knot it. I don't know if you noticed that, but I basically just made a fatter knot so that it wouldn't pull through the holes. And then I trimmed off the longer ends, and that was really it. I love this. I hope you do too, but let me know what you think.
DIY number 6.
All right, this is a little wood oval from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to go ahead and get the sticker off the back of it, and then I'm going to give it a coat of Adirondack white chalk paint. I love this chalk paint, but I'm painting the entire thing, both sides. And once I had that done, I am going to take once it's dry, I should say, I'm taking some sanding paper and I'm just going to give it a good sanding along all the edges, just distressing it a little bit, roughing it up. I'm actually smoothing out some of it too because I hadn't sanded it before, but also sanding part of the surface that I'm revealing a little bit of the wood underneath. Now I have a pencil and I'm going to just draw our little gnome friend on here. I saw a sign, I think it was at the Home Depot, and it had three little gnomes, and it said something about hugs and kisses and Valentine's wishes. And I don't know, I love the little gnomes. I think they're so cute. So I figured I would draw a little gnome on here, and then we're going to paint our little friend. So the great thing about pencil is you can erase it if you don't like what you've done. Just be patient with yourself. You can do this. You absolutely can do this. If I can do this, you can do this. It's a really simple little figure. You can see that I've just drawn right over all of my other markings. So like you can see his beard through the heart right now, that sort of thing. It's pencil, right? You can erase it, but then I'm also going to be using opaque paint, which is going to completely cover it. Just for my own sanity, I did erase some of the pencil marks so that I knew better where I wanted to be putting my paint if I wasn't paying 100% attention, which has been known to happen. So this is a light pink that I had mixed some time back, and I've had it in my stash. I think it was, I want to say the darker pink I have is called Vintage Victorian, I think is what it's called, by Home Decor. And I mixed it with white just to lighten it up. It's probably closest to ballet slipper. So if you have ballet slipper and you're looking for a close match, that's probably what you'd want to use. But it's just a nice light pink. I'm filling in with a small flat brush. I felt that would give me the most control over what I was doing here. And again, if you go out of the lines, it's paint. You can paint over it, right? That was my thought. I'm just taking my time. This is sped up about 2.5 times, so keep that in mind. I'm not moving nearly as fast as it looks because the video is sped up just for the sake of time. So coming in with an even smaller brush with my red paint because I knew I had smaller areas that I needed to be able to get into. And so I am just making my way along those edges and taking my time. I did show more of painting the gnome. I don't know, for whatever reason, I just find it very satisfying to watch, but I also thought you might appreciate being able to see how I was doing this. It was something I was nervous about at first. I honestly didn't think that my hand was going to be steady enough to do this, but it honestly ended up not being as difficult as I had imagined that it would be. Perhaps because I had penciled in my design first, I'm not really sure, but it actually, it was easier than I thought it was going to be. But just taking my time, spinning the oval around so that I can get a good angle to make sure that I can kind of line up my paintbrush with those edges, and just drawing the paintbrush right along my pencil line and smoothing out all of my lines as I go. I did end up giving it a second coat in most areas. And here you see I'm kind of leaving a gap up at his shoulder because I at this point I was worried about how I was going to differentiate between his hat and his body, and then his arms and his body. You know, I was like, how am I going to do this? So I ended up bumping out some elbows for him. So you can see on the right, I kind of put a bump. On the left, it doesn't have it yet. I'm going to make a bump on the left too, just to kind of help differentiate his arms. But then I was doing this and thinking about how I wanted it to be differentiated. I decided I was going to outline it in black. So at that point I was like, all right, well, I'm going to outline it in black. I can go ahead and, you know, paint the rest of his body right up to the hat, and I'm not going to need to worry about, you know, whether the hat looks like it's part of his body. And the black actually ended up making it pop really nicely too. So I'm just going to continue to paint the rest of his little body until I have that all filled in. But let me know what you are thinking about this little guy. I just, like I said, I think the gnomes are absolutely adorable. And I think this little guy is super cute as well. So just running my paintbrush right along the edge of the heart there. And you know what? If you overlap it a little bit, it's perfectly fine, right? I think I did kind of go up right onto the pink a little bit just to make sure that I didn't have any gaps and it was nice and cohesive. So then once my little red hat was dry, I came back in with some of the pink again and I just painted a whole bunch of little hearts on his hat. I felt like it was all just a little too monotone. I thought about maybe making some stripes on his little body. I don't know, would you call that a jacket or what do gnomes wear? Is it like a smock? I have no idea. So anyway, I thought about painting some stripes on him, but then I decided I would just do the hearts and I thought it turned out cute. So now I am using cashew. I believe this is also by Home Decor, cashew chalk paint. It's kind of like a light beige tone, and I used that for his nose as well as for his little hands. I don't know if he's wearing mittens or not, but if he's wearing mittens, they're the same color as his nose. So, but as you can see, all of these paints are completely covering up the pencil marks. So you don't need to worry about the pencil lines if you're using an opaque paint, because the paint will go ahead and completely hide the pencil. So as long as you just go over the outer edge of those pencil lines, you're going to be good to go. I love this little guy so much. So I've got the cashew there, and then this is just the regular black chalk paint, and I'm using a tiny brush for this as well. Now, you could use your brush to do the outline if you would like. I did not. I used a black Sharpie because I did not trust myself to be able to do the line with the paintbrush. I was concerned that I would not be able to get a super straight line, or the paint would fade on me and I'd have to go back over it and I would have globs, and I did not trust myself. So I did use a black Sharpie. And, you know, along those lines, as you're painting your gnome, if you have paint markers or paint pens and you want to use something like that instead of a brush, by all means. I considered using my paint markers for this, but then ultimately decided I really wanted to try and do it with the brush because my paint markers are not as opaque, and I thought I'd get better coverage if I were to use my chalk paint. So that was why I opted to do it the way that I did. And with the white here that I went over with the beard, I'm doing his little puffball on the end of his hat. I kind of gave it a little bit of texture, like I made the paint a little thicker. But here you can see I'm coming in with my Sharpie now that everything is dry. You definitely want to make sure that everything is dry before you do this. I'm just coming in and I am tracing all of the edges. Would you call it edges? But I thought that this really made it pop nicely. I was at first a little afraid when I first thought about doing it. I was like, I don't know if it's gonna, you know, enhance him. I think it definitely enhanced him. So I was not bothered by the black outlining at all. Making sure that I get his beard as well here in a minute. I think right there I had a little bit of the red paint that had not quite dried, and so it kind of ended up smushing a little bit, so I was trying to fix that. And again, just turning him in whichever direction I need to be able to get the angle. There I've got his beard, and then work on his hat. And I even outlined the little hearts also, which gave them more definition, and you'll see that in just a minute. But I was really proud of myself with this little guy. I don't do a lot of drawing per se, and yeah, I mean, I had an image in my head as to what I wanted this little guy to look like, and I pretty much hit the mark on what I was hoping to achieve. So, like I said, I was kind of proud of myself on this one. So coming in and outlining all of the hearts. Again, I'm leaving this in because I just find it very soothing and satisfying, and I hope that you're enjoying this as well. But feel free to fast forward a little bit if you've had enough of watching me outline and paint here. And then just his little nose, and he is all done. I think he's adorable. So this is done except for a little hanger. I have these hangers that I just found when cleaning out my office. So I am going to go ahead and screw them into the back. I did not drill a pilot hole or anything. I wasn't sure how easy this was going to be, but it was actually super easy, like almost too easy. But I went ahead and screwed it almost all the way in. I left it a little bit loose so that I could adjust the little saw blade thing, whatever that is. I don't know what you call this kind of hanger, but I wanted to be able to adjust it a little bit. And here it is.
DIY number 7.
All right, these are little mini wine bottles from an advent calendar my sister gave me for the holidays. And they're just single serving little wine bottles. I'm still making my way through them, but they are so adorable. I had to be crafting with them. If you saw my last minis challenge, you saw me paint one of them for that. But we are using 4 of them now, and I'm just gonna start peeling off all of the labels, get these cleaned up. And I did also pull out my little razor blade from the Dollar Tree. I think it came in like a pack of 4. I thought it was the best deal. It's got these little handles. I don't know. Anyway, they're great to work with. So that got most of the adhesive off along with the labels, but now I'm just coming in with some rubbing alcohol to get the little bits of adhesive that I didn't get off with the razor. Now I am going to be painting these in pink, that same pink that I had mixed earlier. You can see my little dowel there that I had used to add the water back in because I did these before. But painting them with a sponge, a little makeup sponge, and then the other 2 I am doing in that imperial red once again. And I apologize for the squeaky doors. I've got kids that are home for the holidays and doing their thing. But once I had those all painted, I am pulling out my stencils. So in addition to that Love You More, I had the You and Me, Thankful, the little flowers there, and then this is what I was after was the letters. So I have some other larger stencils that are letters, but they just seemed like they were going to be too big, so I figured that these would work better. Honestly, if I had had an intermediate size, is that a mid-range between the 2, I probably would have gone a little bit bigger than this, but I wanted something a little bit smaller than the other. But this worked out just fine. You could also hand letter these, or you could print out a page and do the, pencil on the back of it and then trace it on and then paint over it. There are a lot of different ways that you can get letters on here. It doesn't have to necessarily be a stencil. So getting these all lined up, because in my head I wanted to make sure that I was going to be placing them all at the same distance. Didn't really occur to me that I was going to be having wet paint to contend with, and I wasn't going to want them right next to each other. This is where I messed up and had a little bit too much paint on my thing, so it got a little bit globby. But you know what? It still looked cute, and I was just fine with it. You can still tell that it's an L, so it's all good. But just lining these up on my stencil and making sure that I'm not using too much paint after that L. I don't think I actually even had to dip my sponge back into the paint at all after that. So just going through and making sure that they look approximately centered from top to bottom and that they're straight. And you know what? It worked out just fine. They all, at least from my eye, they look like they're all even. So now I have some baker's twine in pink and white. I also have red and white, and I'm just going to tie the pink and white around the red bottles. I wrapped it 3 times. It's going to look like I'm only wrapping it twice. 1, 2, but then with the tails that are coming forward to make that bow, you end up with 3 strands around the neck. Hopefully that makes sense. But so I did the red with the pink, and now I'm going to do the pink with the red, just to give it a little bit of contrast and make everything cohesive with the pink and the red theme. So doing that for all 4 of the little bottles. I'm not sure why I felt the need to show you how I did this on every single one of them, because I think you got more than the idea of what I'm trying to do here. But once I had those set, I pulled out some baby's breath from my stash. These I had gotten on Amazon recently for a wreath that I had been creating. Actually, I think I did a couple of wreaths recently with these, but normally I would just, I don't know why. I'm just bending up the long stems on these. These had extra long stems, and I'm just bending them and putting them down into the container just in case I want to use them for another project. To be honest, if I use them for another project, I'll probably cut the tails off of them anyway, so I'm not sure why I felt the need to preserve them, but that's what I did for this. Feel free to cut them down for your project, but then I just fluffed up the baby's breath and got it to where I wanted it. And this is going to be all set and done. I love this. I hope you love it too, but let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 8.
All right, these are gift bags from the Dollar Tree and a little Dollar Tree frame. I'm going to go ahead and pick the one that I want to use for this particular project. I'm basically going to use this as a background. So cutting out a nice solid piece of the bag, and I'm going to pull off the little handle here. I'm actually going to save that handle, and I'm going to use it later on for another project. So this is the insert from the frame. I am just tracing it onto my little bag piece that I cut out, and then I'll cut the background, cut the rest of this out so that it is the right shape that will eventually fit into my frame. So now I'm going to take these rub-on transfers from the Dollar Tree, and I am going to figure out which of these words I want to use, and I'm going to cut them out individually so that I can place them around on the background that I had already set up. So here they are all cut out, and I've got them kind of lined up the way that I want them. So now I'm going to go ahead and apply them down. Now, I tried to do the outer edges first, and I am leaving a margin because I know that that'll be hidden by a bit of the frame. So I was just trying to keep that in mind, rubbing them down with my burnishing tool. You can also use a fingernail. Now, right there where I'm putting that little one there, I should have done them like one at a time because I ended up overlapping that love with the embrace, and right here you're going to see when I pull up the one for embrace, I just pulled up a bit of the L there because I had it on top of the plastic sheet, whatever. So it's a little frustrated with myself, but I just grabbed the black Sharpie. I tested it on a scrap piece of this. I just want to make sure it wasn't going to bleed everywhere if I tried to do it with this, and I just touched up that little corner of the L. So here it is, just popping it into the frame. That's it. And I think this is such a sweet piece. You can make it larger if you'd like, whatever your heart desires.
DIY number 9.
All right, I have this little metal love sign that I took off something else. This wood round that you can see is warped. I don't know how it managed to get warped while it was in my stash. So I grabbed some scrap pieces of paint sticks that I had in my stash. And I'm going to use these to kind of brace the back side of it so that it'll keep it nice and flat. So I'm going to grab my Gorilla wood glue. I'm going to run a length of that down both sides. I'm going to kind of create like a rectangle shape here with the wood glue, and then I'm going to use my hot glue down the center. So this is just going to help me be able to continue working with it while the wood glue dries because it takes at least 15 minutes for the wood glue to set up enough for you to be able to work with it. And I think it probably would be better to even leave it for 24 hours. I wasn't confident that it would hold without a little extra help. And I did put that heavy little can on there just to help hold it down for a few minutes. So now I've got my vintage Victorian chalk paint by Home Decor. I thought about using the lighter pink that I've been using in a lot of my projects recently. If you've been following my Valentines videos, that color was created with this and white chalk paint. But I thought, you know what? This is Valentine's Day. I'm going to go ahead and use this color. It's kind of more like a bubblegum pink. I don't know. If I had to do it over again, I might have used the lighter pink. But if you like pink, this is the color for you. It's very pink. Very, very pink. But it turned out just fine. So here it is dry, and I'm going to figure out where I want to position this. Now, you could totally just glue this on and use this for your sign. I am not planning on doing that. I'm going to be tracing this in a minute. I just wanted to give you all another option if you don't have a vinyl cutter, because that's another thing you could do. You could totally, if you've got a Cricut or a Silhouette, you could cut out a stencil, but it's just another option, right? So if you don't have a vinyl cutter, if you don't have a stencil already, if you have something like this, you could absolutely use this to trace onto your project. So I got that all traced on there, and then in a minute I'm going to be grabbing out one of my paint markers, and I'm going to then go over all of these lines with that paint marker. So just different options. So this is, I think this is called Vermilion. I could have that wrong though, but it's a chalk paint marker by Arteza. And so I've pulled this out. I'm going to just trace over all of my lines. Keep in mind that this video is sped up about 2.5 times. So I am just taking my time. I'm tracing over the lines. I ended up going over it a couple of times because I was trying to hide the pencil marks. At first, I had thought about using one of my acrylic paint markers, but I find that the chalk paint markers are more opaque, and I felt like I was going to get better coverage with the chalk paint marker versus the acrylic. So I just continued along to trace over all of that. And then once I had it all filled in, I pulled out my Imperial red paint to fill all of this in. Now I'm using a flat, blunt, I don't know, it's a flat brush, so it's got a very blunt edge to it. So you can kind of see there, and it's got a little bit of stiffness to it, and that I think was very helpful in trying to make sure I stayed within the lines that I needed to stay within here. Now, y'all, it's paint, right? So if you mess up, you can totally just paint over it. You don't need to worry. And again, this is sped up about 2.5 times. So I was really just taking my time, tracing within the lines. I was trying to cover the paint marker as well because it was a little bit lighter in shade than my chalk paint. And so it was kind of giving it this little light outline, and I wasn't a fan of that. So once it was all dry, I did just go ahead and grab my black Sharpie, and I'm going to trace the entire thing with my black Sharpie. And I did that to help cover up any of the paint marker that was still exposed because it was visible. I know you can't really see it here on the video perhaps, but in person it was visible and it was bothering me. So I am tracing it with my black Sharpie. If you have a red Sharpie and want to trace it with the red, or if you have a purple Sharpie and want to trace it with purple, you know, whatever you want to do. You don't even have to trace it if you like it just with the solid color. And if you're using a vinyl cutter or a stencil, you wouldn't even need to worry about this step at all because you would likely have very crisp, clean lines and you wouldn't have needed to deal with outlining it first. So here it is. Once I had it all outlined, I was trying to figure out how I wanted to decorate the rest of this. I knew I wanted to put a big bow on the top, and that's why I put the love a little bit further down on the sign. That's why it's not centered. So I grabbed out this sheer ribbon from Kirkland's. It's, I guess you would say it's a satin ribbon on the two edges, and then it's got this kind of I want to say mesh. That's not really the word that I'm looking for, but it's a very pretty ribbon. And I just looped it around itself about 3 times. I wanted 3 loops on either side. I totally could have made more loops and made a fuller ribbon. Maybe that would have been wise. I don't know, but this is the one that I decided to go with, this style. So once I had 3 loops on either side, I went ahead and trimmed that off. Now I'm going to cut another length to create my little tails. And these scissors do not like cutting through ribbon for whatever else. They are super sharp, but when it comes to fabric and ribbon, they're just, I guess they're just not meant for that. But I went ahead and tied it off in the middle. Once I made sure that I had it properly centered, I went ahead and tied off the knot, made sure that it was nice and tight, and then I'm going to fluff up all of my little loops for my bow. Just getting this nice and full and fluffed and trying to picture what it's going to look like here. So I'm going to go ahead and dovetail my ends. And I always just fold it, and then I try, and I had to kind of change my thing on that because, like I said, the scissors do not like cutting this ribbon for some reason. So I normally go from the creased edge out, or I guess that's what I did end up doing here. I might have just said that backwards. I don't know. The mesh part of the ribbon didn't like being cut, so I had to improvise on that and redo it. But once I had that set, I grabbed some flowers out of my stash, and I decided I was going to place flowers around the bow just to decorate the top part of this wood round. So I am visual, as you probably know if you've been following me, and so I don't like to commit until I can see what something is going to look like. So just placing a bunch of these flowers around. It wasn't really staying put when I was doing it. That's why I decided to set the bow aside for a moment. I'm gonna just lay out my flowers and then I'll see what the bow looks like with it. It just wasn't really cooperating. So I just needed to be a little patient with it. Positioning all of my flowers, setting the bow up, trying to see how it looks. I finally decided I needed to go ahead and anchor it because, like I said, it wasn't really cooperating. Things kept shifting on me and moving. So I started anchoring down. I put a lot of hot glue down there and just made sure all of my little stems, waving it cool, made sure all my little stems were where they needed to be. And then I started looking at what the ribbon would look like. I blew on it for a second and the leaf kind of went into the glue. I'm like, oh no. And then I was like, well, wait, maybe I can help cover up some of the glue with the greenery. So that was actually a happy accident. So I went ahead and pushed that back down, Because the ribbon is so sheer, I needed to be very conscious of what was underneath it and what was visible, because clearly you can see right through a lot of this ribbon. So that worked out well. And I am going to realize in a moment that I've got a bunch of hot glue oozing out of the top there. From my position, I can't really see over the ribbon because my work surface it's raised, it's counter height. Because I stand while I'm crafting, and so I can't always see on the other side of my projects when I'm doing it. But that's okay, we got it all sorted out. So just adjusting where I want the tails, and here I'm adjusting the bow part and just making sure that it's up high enough there. And then I'm going to go back in and add in some more flowers because this was looking really sparse to my eye, and I knew that I needed to get some additional stuff going on because it was just too blank. And I'm just coming in with my hot glue and making sure everything is secured, dropping in some additional flowers, and I just kept doing that until I had it the way that it looked nice to my eye. If you prefer things that are a little bit more minimalist, absolutely, you could totally leave it a little bit more sparse. I like my things nice and full. So, like I said, just continued to add more flowers until I had it the way I wanted it. So now it was seeming a little top heavy to me. So I finally decided I was going to add just a few little flowers to the bottom there. And I thought that that looked cute like that, just those 3 little flowers, but I needed to trim off their stems some more because they were just kind of getting in each other's way and not allowing the flowers to set up the way that I wanted them to set. So trimmed those off, and then I was ready to kind of glue down this little bunch of floral fun. So got the hot glue there, added that in, and then I'll actually put a little bit more hot glue down inside of there to make sure that everything is nice and secure. And there you have it. Now, have you ever seen those flowers that have like little dewdrops on them? I decided I was going to try and do that with my hot glue, and I think it actually turned out pretty good. So I literally just put little drops of hot glue on the petals. So a little drop of hot glue, and I'm kind of going around in circles. That's just because it's got the little string of hot glue coming off of it, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't have a string coming off of each of my little drops there. And I just went around and added them randomly to different petals and just made sure that it was just a teeny little drop that was sitting there. And I keep blowing on it to get it to cool because I don't want it to start dripping down. But let me know what you think.
DIY number 10.
All right, I have a cutout Be Mine from the Dollar Tree, the little thing I'm trying to get the hanger off of. It's a wood piece from the Dollar Tree as well. And then I have those little hearts. They are, I think they call them vase filler, also from the Dollar Tree. I am filling in my hole here with hot glue, as you saw, and it kind of went all the way through to the other side. So when I flipped it over, I didn't need to worry about filling in the other side. While that's cooling completely, it's important that it's completely cool, I went ahead and gave a first coat of Adirondack white chalk paint to my Be Mine, and now this is my little Dollar Tree blade that I'm using to cut away. And be careful if you do this, I should not be doing it towards myself, I should always be doing it away from myself, but just trimming off the excess glue that kind of scooshed out. And it's a little bit wider on the side because I had flipped it over and put it down on the parchment paper. But I did that on both sides. And then just using a little bit of sandpaper to make sure that that's nice and smooth. If you have wood putty, that's the proper way to do it. I am out of my spackle, my wood putty, so this is what I chose to do. And then I went ahead and gave my Be Mine a couple of more coats of the white paint. Now this is a light pink that I had mixed quite some time ago. If you've been watching my videos in recent weeks, you know that this is something I did a while ago, and I've just been using it for all my projects. I had saved the paint, so it was vintage Victorian with some white added to it. So it's just a nice pretty pink. I'm gonna go ahead and add on my Be Mine to, I guess it's like the bottom 2/3 of this, and just make sure it's nice and lined up. And then I'm going to take one of my little vase filler hearts and add that onto the little piece here. In hindsight, I probably could have centered top to bottom the Be Mine a little bit more. I was thinking that this heart was a little bit bigger in my mind. I don't know why. So if I had to do it again, I would probably center it. But now I am taking a new cord. This is something I picked up from the Hobby Lobby. It was, I think, 60% off all of their Christmas stuff. So it's kind of a metallic red cord that I'm using, and it's obviously perfect for Valentine's Day. So I am just using a little teeny tiny bit of hot glue. You can see I'm actually taking away some of the hot glue that was excess there. It only needs a teeny tiny little bit. And because this cord has a little bit of rigidity to it, I am able to kind of meld it, if you will. So I'm just adding some hot glue to some strategic points, if you will, to get it adhered onto the sign the way that I want it and in the shape that I'd like for it to be in. Because otherwise, if I tried to lay hot glue for this entire thing, it would be a hot mess. There would be hot glue kind of everywhere, I think. So, because this cord, it's not as wide as the last cord that I used, which is why it would be a little bit more challenging to use the hot glue for the entire circumference. Circumference, to use that for a rectangle shape, or is that only for a circle? I think you know what I'm trying to say. So there it is. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 11.
All right, I have these little cork stoppers from those little mini wine bottles. So they are not going to waste. We are going to use them. I've got 5, one from the minis video I had done, and now 4 additionals. And I am going to pull out all of the paper that I'd like to use for this project. I have 2 pieces of 8.5 by 11 cardstock, and then I've got scrapbook paper pages. I'm just trying to find things that are complementary in patterns or colors, really. So I don't know. I wanted them to be contrasting but complementary. So I've also got this giant piece of, it's just like copy paper, but it's huge. I don't know what size it is. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably 16 by 20 or something like that. But now I've got a clock going on. Y'all, I can't win this morning. I have so much going on in my house with not all that much going on in my house, just a lot of background noise. I apologize. But I'm basically just cutting it down to the size of the scrapbook paper so that I can make a pattern. So folding my paper in half, and you could draw this first if you wanted to. I am just going to cut out a heart shape and I'm gonna get that all, yeah, it's just a teardrop shape. So I've got my pattern here, I got my heart, and I am going to go ahead and put it on the back of my page. I was just looking to see which way I wanted the pattern to be going. I did go ahead and trace this, and then I cut it out for this first heart. But with the rest of them, I ended up just using this first heart and holding it up and just cutting around it. I didn't bother with tracing and doing that. So cut out all of my hearts. Now with the 8.5 by 11 sheets, clearly those are smaller than the scrapbook pages, so my pattern was going to be a little bit too big. So I just cut down my pattern to create a smaller heart, and I went with it from there. So I cut it down a little bit, opened it up. It was still a little too wide, so I went ahead and cut off a little bit more. And if I had to do these again, I would probably make these hearts much more narrow rather than wide. And you'll see why in a little bit, but I would have made them tall and skinny hearts, because I think it would have worked out better with this particular project. But I went ahead and cut out the pink and purple the same way that I did the others. And once I had all of my hearts cut out, I'm going to go ahead and start folding the hearts in a fan pattern. So I'm going to start at the bottom and fold it up and then down and just back and forth, like you would if you were creating a fan with a regular piece of paper. Now I started at the bottom because I felt like it was just going to be easier than trying to line up the top with the bumps in the heart. So that was the reason I started at the bottom with each of these. And once I had it all folded, I'm just trying to make sure I'm keeping it straight going up the length of the heart. But you can see now why it would be better if it was, if they were skinny hearts. You'll see better in a minute. But I took my hole puncher. Don't recommend trying to go through all these layers of cardstock with a hole puncher because it just wasn't happening. So I pulled it out and I'm just going to do a couple at a time. And then I'm going to use the first holes that I created to make sure that I'm lining up with each consecutive hole, because you got to make sure that these holes are all lined up. So I'm using the hole that I made previously to guide the next hole that I'm punching. Hopefully that makes sense. But looking at that purple one that's laying there now, you can see it would have been better if the hearts were, skinnier, because once you crunch them like that, they get wider all by themselves. If you know what I mean. Now these are a bunch of skewers from the Dollar Tree. I'm just putting them right down through my hearts, and I've got the pointy end at the bottom, and that is where our little cork is going to come in. This is going to be anchored down into the cork in a minute. But right now I'm just trying to figure out what length I need to have. Oh, yep. And then I'm going to go ahead and anchor it down. I decided to anchor it and then finish determining how tall I wanted these to be. So kind of pull it down. And I didn't show you because it was off screen, but I used my little dog nail clippers to trim the skewer. I did find that my scissors also work just fine with these. So if you don't have dog nail clippers, you can totally use scissors. And then I trimmed down the rest of my skewers to be about the same height as that first one. Now with the pink and purple, I am going to need to trim that down even further because those hearts are a little bit smaller than the other ones that I did with the scrapbook paper. I did decide that it was easier to put these skewers into the little corks before I added on my paper hearts. So I went ahead and did that. And then I added on the hearts. Now, when if you fold them back up into their fan shape, it's a lot easier to get them on there, and you just have to delicately kind of open them up along the skewer. So I was showing you these other heart picks that I have. I'm going to be using those in a second, but first I'm going to just anchor these at the top and bottom with the hot glue because it was kind of collapsing on itself. And then I guess I don't think I anchored the top of this one yet. I wanted to see where this heart was going to land. So I am basically sharpening the top of the skewer by trimming it with my scissors and just cutting it away to make a point so that I can stick it into that foam heart in a second. But you could also use a pencil sharpener. If you have a pencil sharpener, that would work too, I would think. And then I just stuck that little heart on there, and now I'm going to anchor it with some more hot glue at the top now that I know where I want it to sit. And sorry, I'm kind of out of frame here, but I'm just putting a little bit of hot glue on the back side up against the skewer where it meets the paper so that it's just not gonna, it's anchored and it's not gonna start moving. And I put a little bit at the top of the heart there too because there wasn't another hole there for it to grab. So for the pink and purple ones, as I mentioned, I've got to make these a little bit shorter. So I cut that off at an angle to help with making my little point, and then just trimmed it up to get it sharp, knocking things over. And then I could set my little heart right down on top of there. All right, and here they are all made. Let me know what you think of these.
DIY number 12.
All right, I have this heart-shaped wreath form. It's a, oh my goodness, words, what are they? Grapevine form. And I've got these beautiful flowers that my subscriber Rose had sent to me a while back, and I've had them in my stash, and I decided this would be a great project for some of them. I'm going to create kind of an ombre effect with the flowers. I was a little worried that they would be a little bit too large for this small little wreath frame that I have, but I think it worked out really nicely. So I'm starting out by just cutting off my little picks. I'm leaving about a 3 to 4 inch length of the stem on each of these. And I'm going to start with the ivory color at the top, and then move to the blush, and then the, I'm going to call it, I don't know, a solid pink. I don't know what else you'd call it, medium pink, and then the deeper purplish pink tone, mauve kind of color. So I am starting at the bottom with the darkest color. I only used one of those, and then I have a couple of the medium pink color, and then I'm moving on to the blush. And I'm literally just kind of pushing the stems down into the wreath form, and it was secure enough that I did not feel the need to use any hot glue at all for this project. So that makes things pretty easy. So just working my way around the wreath, and I'm trying to decide which way I want those to be facing. So I opted to go the opposite direction at this point, and then I will be creating a bow, because I did want to make a bow for this, and I was trying to figure out where I was going to put that. And I thought, you know what, it'll look perfectly natural and in a perfect place to have it kind of in the middle there. So I did have one stem sticking out a little bit there, so I just trimmed that off and decided I was going to trim these other two just because of the way that the wreath form is shaped. I thought I might have some other issues with the stems kind of going through and sticking out. So got that all set. Counting my roses, I decided I wanted to put another one up at the top, so I've got another one of the ivory. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a bow there. I pulled out this really pretty satin ribbon. It is wired, but I was a little worried that it was going to be too wide. I think this is 1.5 inches, if I'm not mistaken. It might be 2 inches, but I think it's 1.5 inches. But I created 3 loops on either side. I'm just kind of wrapping them back and forth. Yeah, just kind of any which way, really. There wasn't really a rhyme or reason. I was just trying to make sure I had 3 loops on either side. And then I will cut off a piece to create the bow part in the middle. I did leave long tails. I kind of had this vision of the tails kind of floating down from the wreath. But I'm taking that smaller piece, tying it through the middle. As soon as you tie off your bow like this, it will get a little wonky, so just be patient with yourself, and don't worry if the loops get a little weird when you first tie it off, because you can always fluff them back up again. Now, in hindsight, looking at this, I actually kind of like this a lot more than I did at the time. When I was putting this on there, I felt like I wasn't covering up enough of the grapevine there. I felt like you were going to be able to see stuff that I didn't want seen. So I set that bow aside, and I decided to make a fuller bow. And so I'm just taking a whole bunch of the ribbon, and I'm going to go back and forth here. At first I was going to make a really long tail on it, and then I decided that I would do a faux tail. So I'm going back and forth until I get 6 loops on either side. And once I have all of those loops set, I'll go ahead and I'm going to notch. Actually, I'm going to cut that off first. And then I did, create another or cut off another length of ribbon to make the tail piece. I'm not going to need that just yet, but I went ahead and cut that off. So now I'm going to cut notches for my bow, just trying to find center there, cutting notches. You don't want to cut too far into this. I cut not even 1/4 of an inch. So did that on both sides, and now I have a chenille stem that I'm wrapping around there. Before I seal that up though, I'm going to drop my ribbon in that's going to be my faux tails. So kind of right in the middle. So they were kind of like half and half on either side of the chenille stem. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I twisted the chenille stem off until that was all ready and complete. And now I'm fluffing up my bow. So I'm gonna dovetail all of my little ends here, and then I'll be ready to attach it to the wreath. So I'm just using the same chenille stem, twisting it around on my wreath until it's nice and secure, and then I'm going to bend that over and twist it some more just so that I can get it all nice and tucked away and it won't be poking at anything or anyone. And that's that. Now I felt like this bow might be a little bit too large, so I went from not enough bow, so I thought, to way too much bow. Maybe. I don't know. I'll show you the end result on this and on what I'm going to do next. And I'll ask you to tell me which one you think is better. So at any rate, I decided, you know what, I'm going to take this. Oh, nope. First I decided I was putting another flower in there. So it needs another flower. Tucking that in. So this is really very pretty, but again, I felt like maybe it was just too much bow. So I went ahead and took that bow off, and I'm going to create a new bow. This is bow number 3, 3rd time's the charm, maybe. I've got this really pretty pink gingham or buffalo check ribbon. I didn't have a lot of it left, so I was able to create, I think it was maybe 4 loops on either side, or maybe it was 4 loops on one side and 3 on the other. I don't honestly recall, but I got that tied off. I essentially made it the same way that I did the pink bow before, and then I made a second one with my this is a pink with white polka dot ribbon that I created a second bow with. And then once I had both of those created, just making sure everything is nice and centered, I went ahead and I tied both of them together. So I just set one on top of the other, and I used the same ties to tie a knot in each of those. And I did it twice, right? So I did with one and then the other because I didn't want anything slipping or sliding. So those are nice and secure. I went ahead and dovetailed all of those ends as well. I'm just folding them in half and holding them between my fingers to clip them, checking out what it's going to look like. I think this is definitely better. So, but let me know what you think. I don't know. I don't hate the original bow. I mean, hate is a strong word, right? I don't dislike the original bow, but I don't know. This is very different, right? So one is probably a little bit more romantic, and this one is probably a little bit more country chic. I don't really know, but let me know which one you think is better.
DIY number 13.
All right, for this DIY, I have a few hearts that I had pulled, actually 2 hearts that I pulled off of something else a while back, plus a wooden heart from the Dollar Tree. And then this is a little hanging shelf that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, but we're going to use it for a sign. Now, I was out of my spackle or my wood putty, so I went ahead and just filled this in with some hot glue. And once it was cool, I'll show you what I'm going to do with that. While it's cooling, I'm grabbing my Imperial chalk paint by Home Decor. And I'm just gonna give my wooden heart a coat of red paint. I painted both sides, not necessary because we're gonna be adhering this onto the sign, but I don't know. For whatever reason, I decided to paint both sides of it. So while that was drying, I came back to the little sign. I'm getting my razor blade all together in my Dollar Tree razor blade, and I'm just shaving off the excess hot glue from that hole that I filled in. So I don't know. I find this to be a relatively easy way to fill in holes as well. And then I'm also not having to wait for my spackle to dry. But the spackle is probably a better way to do it. So I sanded that down, and now I'm grabbing my Adirondack white chalk paint, and I'm going to give this a good coat on both sides as well. Now, while that is, oh, actually, once that's all dry, I went ahead and grabbed out my, I call these puffy tape. I'm not sure what the real name is for it, but this is also from the Dollar Tree. It's kind of like a foam tape, so it's a double-sided foam, double-sided tape that's also foam. So they're going to kind of be three-dimensional a little bit because they're going to stand maybe 1/8 of an inch off of the surface of my sign. And I'm just applying a bunch of that, and then I'll peel away the little backings. And then I'm going to line up my red heart first because that's the one I want to have in the middle. I'm going to make sure that it's nice and centered. So grabbing up my ruler here probably, maybe not yet. All right, I will grab out my ruler in just a second, but just trying to line that up by sight. And then I'm going to grab my ruler, making sure that it is centered. And once I have it where I want it, going to go ahead and just press it down. And then I did the same thing with the burlap heart and with the galvanized heart. And just making sure that they're kind of centered between the red heart and the edge. So just 3 little different hearts. I don't know. I think this is so simple and so sweet. I'm in love with this one. And then I took the cord that came with the little floating shelf, right? And this was from the Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to put a little bit of hot glue at the end. I do have this on my low setting. I've been using my hot glue gun on the lower setting for a while now. I like it a lot. The only times I increase it to hot, I can't talk this evening for whatever reason as I'm recording this, but I turn it up when I'm working on things where it causes the glue to cool faster than I can work with it. And usually that has to do with metal or glass because, I don't know, in my basement, they just are colder. So otherwise, the low setting's been working great. So this ring also came with the floating shelf. And I'm going to use this as my hanger. You don't have to. You could just use a cord. You could use jute twine, whatever it is that you have in your stash. You don't have to have this. I just happened to have it, and so I figured I would use it. I'm just trying to get it all lined up and with not the way that I wanted. I had done it the other way, and then I wanted it facing the opposite direction. So I tend to be a little particular at times. So once I had that set and where I wanted it, I went ahead and added some hot glue to the end of the cord on the other end so that I could thread it through without it fraying up on me. I'm just kind of making sure that the paint is knocked out of the hole, getting some of the debris out of the way, and then I can press that through. Now the reason I'm coming through from the back and having the knots on the front is, and you could, if you don't want to see the knots, you certainly could go the other way, but when you hang it on the wall, it's going to kind of lean forward a little bit if you do it that way. And I wanted my sign to lay flush against the wall. So just making sure this is centered again, and it's all set. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 14.
I have a whole bunch of stuff here. So I've got my wooden beads that I pulled out of my stash. I also have this ribbon that was actually just going to go into the trash, and I took it from someone who was going to throw it away. So I recuperated that. Those little hearts that are like vase filler from the Dollar Tree, and I've got some paper, scrapbook paper, and then some other sheets of paper that I'm going to pull out of my various little booklets here that I'm going to be using for this project. So once I had all of the sheets identified, it was pretty much just a bunch of different sheets that I thought would be fun together. Not really any rhyme or reason. I just thought that they would look nice together. So you can see what I pulled out of there. And I was still trying to put together in my mind how I was going to do this. But I grabbed out these little skewers. I had pulled these off of other foam hearts. They were like foam heart picks. And I had saved the skewers. So now I'm going to use them for this project and put all of my little wooden beads on there. Painted them with my Imperial Red chalk paint by Home Decor. And once I had those all painted, I kind of separated them a little bit so that they could not be touching while they were drying. They did dry pretty quickly, but I set those aside. And now I've got my little paper cutter, and I'm just going to slice. I think they were just shy of an inch. I would say they were probably 3/4 inch strips off of each of the papers that I've selected. So I'm just going to get that lined up and slice off about 3/4 of an inch. I didn't want them to be too wide, but I also wanted them to be somewhat substantial. And I did 15 total strips. So once I had them all cut down here, you can see them. And I'm just separating them out into 3 different sets. So 3 sets of 5 strips each. I wanted to make sure that they all had different strips in them. So you can see some of them are similar, but they're going to be matched up with other piles, stacks where there isn't one. Now I am going to measure off an inch from one. So I left the one, I left the full 12-inch length, and I took an inch off of the next one. I'm going to take 2 inches off the third one. I'm going to take 3 inches off the fourth one. And then on the fifth one, I'm going to take off 4 inches. So they're all going to be kind of staggered in length there. So you can kind of see that. I did that with all 3 sets, and they're all different. And now I'm going to fold them all in half, and I'm folding them inside out. Yeah, inside out, so to speak. So the decorative side I am folding in, and you'll see why in just a minute. So got those all done, and now I'm kind of trying to figure out how I'm going to make the hearts. See, that's why I folded them the way I did, so that when I make the heart, the fold is the top part of the heart, and yeah, so that should hopefully make sense. Now I'm going to poke a hole in the middle of each crease, center of the crease. It wasn't working so well with the skewer, so I grabbed my paper piercer, and this was working like this with me holding it, but I found that as I was doing it, I was kind of getting a crease going the opposite way. It was kind of like molding around the little the piercing tool. So I grabbed out this little cork that I have. It's kind of on a little wooden circle thing that I got out of a little mini wine bottle that I'd crafted with recently. And I used that as a place to pierce my hole. You could also use, I used to use pillows underneath. Like if you've got an old pillow that you don't mind putting a piercing hole through, you could certainly put that underneath. Or maybe a self-healing mat would work. I'm not sure. But this one, I decided to just fold them all together and pierce them all at once. So that's what I did with the rest of those. Now I'm ready for my little red beads. They're all dry. I've got my skewer. I'm taking one of my foam hearts, one of those vase fillers, and then I'm going to cut the skewer, the other end of the skewer. I put the pokey end of the skewer down into the heart, and now I made another pokey end to help me get it through the paper, through the hole that I had created. So then I put a little bead on top, I figured that would help serve as a spacer for what I was trying to do. And then also, I was hoping was going to help me with getting the heart shape. So I went ahead and I glued the base here, and I'm realizing to get that heart shape, I'm going to have to do something else. It's not going to just stay on its own, but I'm still thinking about it at this point. So now I'm going with the next layer. Now, originally I was thinking I wanted all of these hearts to kind of go around each other. Cutting off just 1 inch from the strips was not sufficient to do that. So I had to go to plan B, and I decided, okay, well, I'll slide it up and I'll just create heart shapes all up the length of the skewer. Now I'm just gluing the little tiny corners here because I still wanted my heart to be able to spin around the skewer so that they wouldn't all just be completely lined up. I could offset them a little bit so you can see how that was still spinning there. I'm putting down my bead, still trying to decide how I'm going to get that bottom one to be a heart shape. So I finally did just put a little bit of hot glue down at the base of my little paper heart, and I attached it to the base of the foam heart. Now here I decided before I was going to just start gluing the ends together before I put it back on the skewer. I forgot to put like a little bend or something in there, so it's not glued in the center there. The paper was together and I couldn't get the little skewer in there. So finally I got that in there. And there you can see that worked just fine. So eventually I did just start putting a little teeny tiny bend in the center of the paper before I glued it together. And then I finished it off with another foam heart. I'd forgotten to put the bead on there, so put my bead on, another little foam heart, and that one is all set except for a hanger. And I'm going to be using this ribbon that I had talked about. I had saved it from the trash. It wasn't in the trash yet. I saved it before it went into the trash, but that's where it was heading. And I'm going to make my little hangers. So I created just a loop, put a really nice knot in there. I trimmed down the end as much as I could, so it almost looks like there's just a little knobby there. And I'm going to put that little knobby right at the top of the heart and kind of stick it on there with the hot glue that I just deposited in the little crevice of the top part of the heart. So I'm sorry you can't really see what I'm doing, but I was basically just holding it there and kind of pressing it down into the foam heart. I do have my hot glue on the low setting, so it was not melting the foam, but it worked actually quite well. So I did that with the other two, and now I've got these fun little hangers that I could put in my window, or you could make a fun garland with them. But let me know what you think.
DIY number 15.
All right, this little kisses sign is from the Dollar Tree, as is the seahorse little wood panel sign that you see here. Now I want to cut that off, but my little hand miter saw, it's not wide enough for this. So I'm gonna just score it, really. I started out with my X-Acto knife, and then ultimately I grabbed out my big box cutter because the X-Acto knife was just taking forever, and I was like, you know what, I have a box cutter, I bet that'll go through it faster. So just scoring it and bending it and scoring it some more and bending it until it came apart for me. Then I just sanded off that little edge to make sure everything was nice and neat. And now with my kisses sign, I am painting it this nice light pink. This is a paint color that I had mixed up sometime back. I used my vintage Victorian and just added white, Adirondack white chalk paint to it until I got the tone that I wanted, and I've just been using it in various other projects ever since. So now while that's drying, I am kind of making my own stamp. I honestly didn't know if this was going to work, you guys, but I figured, you know what, I'm going to try, because I wanted lips. I wanted to be able to put little kisses all over my sign. And I had checked my stash to see if I had any kind of rub-on transfers or anything that I could use for that, and I did not. So I'm just using my little fine scissors here that came with some of my Cricut supplies, and I am cutting it into a makeup sponge. So I use these for stenciling quite often. And so, yeah. So I was testing it out with the pink, then I moved on to the red, and this is Imperial Red by Home Decor. And you know what? I thought it came out pretty okay. So I don't know. I'll let you be the judge and let me know if you think that this worked out. But I was just trimming it off a little bit more to try to avoid some of the smudging that I was noticing here. But it was really just clipping away lower down on the sponge, if that makes any sense at all. So once I was satisfied with what was happening, I went ahead and I placed my little kiss marks all over my sign. They're all a little bit different, I guess, because of the variation in pressure that I was applying as I did it, but I think it all worked out in the end. So once I had those all on there and they were dry, I did decide that I was going to come in. Oh, not just yet. I'm going to show you first what it looks like with the kisses sign. I was, and as you know, I'm very visual. I have to see things and then I decide if I'm going to do more or less. So this is where I decided I was coming with my black Sharpie, going to define all of the little lips a little bit better, just kind of giving them an outline and then kind of lining where the differentiation between the two lips was. So you can do this however it makes you happy, right? So if you don't care for the way that I did it, by all means, I'm sure that somebody's got a better idea than what I'm showing here. But I did decide that my kisses sign needed a little something more, so I took this magenta toned acrylic paint marker, and I am just outlining the entire sign. Eventually I decided it was going to be easier if I set it down flat, so that's what I did. I decided to color in that top heart. I'm just leaving a little square for kind of like a shine kind of mark on my heart, if that makes any sense. Oh boy. And just going to continue to outline the entire sign all the way around. Once I had that set, I was able to go ahead and apply it to my sign. This is finally where I have it. I'm satisfied with it. Using hot glue, I'm working pretty quickly here because I don't want the hot glue to cool before I can get this placed down. I am using the low setting on my glue gun. And then I wanted to try and camouflage those little holes in the metal sign. I started painting it in just with the pink, but then I was like, you know what if I just put some hot glue in that hole and then paint over it? I thought maybe it would work better, and honestly it did. Now the one on the left worked better than the one on the right that I'd been messing with. So yeah, but it camouflaged the holes quite nicely. So I was pleased with that. So once I was done with that, just went over it with a little bit more paint, but I pulled out another ribbon from my stash. This is just a plain skinny pink satin ribbon, and I'm going to be using this as my hanger. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to keep this on here. I was just going to wrap it around either side. So wrapping it around, bringing it across the top in a moment, and then down, wrapping it around the other side. But then I was worried about whether it would end up pulling away from itself with the pressure on the hot glue. So I wasn't sure that it was going to stay adhered to the sign. So I did end up ultimately framing out this entire piece with the ribbon, and you'll see that in just a moment. But just trimming that off, I want to make sure that everything is lined up properly and that my ribbon isn't twisted, so that's why I keep wrapping it the way that I do. But I'm going to secure it the same way on this side as I did on the other side. Just made sure that my end was trimmed nicely, laying down some hot glue, And again, I'm using this on the low setting, which is why you don't see me using my finger protectors. I'm still being careful because I still can burn myself with it on the low setting, but just not nearly as bad as when it's on the high setting. So I'm being careful. So definitely recommend using finger protectors when working with hot glue. I guess my fingers are getting kind of used to it at this point, but when it's on the hot setting, or the high setting, I definitely use the finger protectors more than I do when it's not. Probably not as often as I should, but as you can see here, I just added a little dot of hot glue to the top of each of those ribbons, and I'm laying a piece across the top, and now I'm going to anchor it in the back. And this is largely due to the fact that I don't want the hanger ribbon to pull away from the top of my sign with the pressure of holding up the sign. So this is going to just anchor that, but I actually like the way that it looks better with the ribbon anyway. So it actually turned out to be really, really positive. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is less of a functional and more of an aesthetic piece down at the bottom, but I went ahead and did it down along the bottom as well, and I anchored it on the back the same way. So just using a little bit of the hot glue and getting that all situated, and then this piece is really done after that, you guys. So I hope that you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed making it, but let me know your thoughts on this one.
DIY number 16.
All right, I have some rub-on transfers on the Dollar Tree, a Dollar Tree frame, a piece of cardstock, and a stencil that I got from Plaid in a pack of like 6 different stencils. And I am painting the frame. Well, I painted it with my Adirondack white chalk paint, and now I'm cutting out all of the little pieces of these dandelion rub-on transfers. And I started to lay them out and realized, you know what, my cardstock is too big for my frame. I have an 8 by 10 frame and an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock. And I'm sorry if you can hear Sammy's chain rattling in the background. His collar is jingling a little bit and he's bouncing around. But I went ahead and traced off the backing to my frame and then cut down my cardstock so that I know that it's going to fit inside my frame. And now I can go ahead and place my gold transfers around on my purple cardstock. And once I have them all laid out where I want them, I will peel away the backings and rub them down. You can use whatever colors you want for this. You can use any kind of rub-on transfer that you want. Originally, I was going to actually do a tulip stencil background on this and could not find my tulip stencil for the life of me. I cannot figure out where it went. It was in the same pack with the other stencil that I'm going to be using, and yeah, I looked everywhere. I actually even cleaned up my craft room a little bit looking for it, and I'll probably find it next week. But anyway, I went ahead and stenciled on the You and Me with a makeup sponge and my white Adirondack chalk paint, or Adirondack white chalk paint, and just dabbing. You noticed perhaps that I had put a whole bunch of paint up at the top right away from all of the letters, just to make sure I didn't have too much on my sponge. I thought that came out so nice, and once it was dry, I went ahead and put it back in the frame. I'm noticing now that I didn't finish painting the back of the frame, so I will have to go back and do that, because if you followed me for any amount of time, you know I like all of my stuff to be completely finished, and this is driving me crazy looking at it now. But I will go back and finish painting that. So just securing in, excuse me, the back of the frame here to get this all finished. And apparently I had another little piece that I wanted to try and get in there. I finally was like, nope, not going to happen. But this turned out so nice. I love it. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 17.
All right, this is going to be a quick and easy project. I have from Couture, this is Shimmer Plum, and the other one is Pomegranate. And the pomegranate is flat, it's not shimmery. But I'm giving my wood scrap, this was from the garage that Rich had cut down for me a while back, and I gave that a coat of Adirondack white chalk paint. And now I'm using my transfer from Couture. I'm making sure that what do they call this? I want to say fluff it, but that's not right. Fuzz. I'm fuzzing my transfer. I have been remiss in doing this in the past, and then it ends up being really hard to get off, or it pulls up my paint or whatever else. So I made sure I fuzzed it several times per the instructions. Go figure, I am following instructions. Lining this up on here, and then I'm going to come in with my little squeegee. I don't know if it's called a squeegee, but that's what I'm using or calling it. And I'm using my plum shimmer, or my shimmer plum, on the U part, and you just press it right through. I'm always amazed at how nicely this turns out, quite honestly. And I have been a Couture representative, I guess you could call that. So I have information down in my description box if you are interested in taking a look at that. I don't do a lot with it, to be quite honest. But I liked having the ability to get the discount and all of the transfers, and yeah, I just think it's fun. And I get my little monthly transfer in the mail. It just makes me happy. So here we go with the reveal on this. I think it's so cool. And I can reuse this thing like a whole bunch of times. I hear, 10 or a dozen times or so at least. But I think it turned out really nicely. So once it's dry, I'm going to flip it over. And this is where I realized that I didn't paint the back side of it. So before I put on my little wall hanger piece, I'm going to go ahead and I sanded that down because it was kind of protruding a little bit. It was like bulky, but anyway, I gave it a good coat of chalk paint. I helped it dry with my heat gun, and then I can come in and put this little hanger on the back. I'm just going to make sure I have it lined up, and then I'll be able to screw it right in. And this is something that I wanted to make for Rich. I gave it to him last night, and I think he likes it, so maybe we'll see if he hangs it on his wall. But I just thought it was a really sweet sentiment, and I don't know, I love this. I think it turned out really nice, but let me know what you think.
DIY number 18.
All right, this is a little tray that's been in my stash and a card from the Dollar Tree. That little tray from my stash, I think my subscriber Rose sent that to me a while back, and I love them because they make the best signs. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut out a piece of this card. I'm just trying to get the piece above the Happy Valentine's Day. So putting it into my paper cutter so that I can get some good straight lines. I'm gonna line that up and just trim it on down. So I've got that piece cut down, just making sure. I'm trying to decide if it's well enough centered. I decided that it was. So I'm just gonna cut off that other piece at the bottom, and I will be good to go with that. And then I'm going to go ahead and peel off the stickers. Now it was leaving a little bit of adhesive on the back of the little I keep calling it a tray. I don't know what else to call it, but that's actually going to come in handy in a little bit. I didn't worry about it. You can always sand that off, but I'm actually going to use it. So unscrewed the little doodad on the front of there. I don't know what you'd call that, but I am now sanding down the little areas where those holes were. That'll be the bottom, so I'm not going to worry about it. You certainly could wood putty it, but here I am just applying the piece from the card, the Valentine's Day card, and you can see I'm just using that adhesive to my advantage. Now, it's not enough to hold it forever, but the next step that we're going to do here is going to take care of making sure that the whole thing is nice and secured. This is kind of like, it's kind of like a really thick baker's twine, but it's not twine. It's a softer material. I don't know. It's somewhere between a twine and a ribbon. I don't know how else to describe it, but I had gotten this in a stash of, not a stash, but in a bunch of different colors of pink and white ribbon from Michaels. I think it was on in their clearance section like a year or two ago. It's been in my stash for a while, but basically just running a bead of hot glue all around the edges here, as you saw, and laying down the cord, that's the word that I was looking for, and trimming off the ends, and then just making sure I've got a little bit of hot glue there to keep any of it from fraying. That is on the low setting, so that's why I am not burning myself, but I love this too. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 19.
All right, this is from the Dollar Tree. It's a little love sign. It obviously has a hanger on it, but as you saw, it can stand up on its own. So I decided to take the hanger off, giving this a good coat. Actually, I think I gave it 2 coats of my Adirondack white chalk paint by Home Decor. And once I was done with that, I set it aside to dry. And this is a little grapevine heart from the Dollar Tree. I think it had come in a pack of 6, if I'm not mistaken. No, maybe 3. I can't remember. It's been a while, and this is one of 2 I have left in my stash. But then I also grabbed this, it's actually ribbon, this little leafy ribbon. And the red cord. The ribbon is from Amazon. You should be able to find that in my Amazon store, and there's a link in my description box. And then the red cord is from the Hobby Lobby, and I'd gotten that after Christmas when all the good sales were happening. So I had just tried to figure out how much of this I was going to need to wrap around the heart, because I try not to waste any more than I have to. So I wanted to make sure that when I cut a length of it, it was going to be sufficient, but not going to leave a whole lot of the leaf ribbon left over for me to have to trim off. So as you can see, I am just wrapping the grapevine little mini wreath, for lack of a better term, with my ribbon. And I did find when I got to the end that I had a lot left over, and so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make it a little bit my wrapping a little bit closer together to use up more of that ribbon. So I ended up kind of undoing most of it, and I kind of redid it so that my wrapping was closer together. Hopefully that makes sense. So once I got down to the end, I just added a little bit more hot glue, held that down on there. This is on the back side of it, and then I could just trim off the little end there, and you can see I've got a lot less left over there. And then I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with the cord, if I wanted to wrap it somehow, but then I decided I was just going to put a cute little dainty bow at the top of the heart. So I just tied a regular tie your shoelace kind of bow. So tied that and then trimmed off the end so my 2 tails would be about the same length. Once I had my loops the way that I wanted them, just looking at it, I just thought this was so cute. I tried to put a little hot glue on there to keep it from unraveling, but when I did that, I ended up unraveling it a little bit. So I ended up just sticking the entire cord like into the hot glue gun, and that kind of just coated it. It reminded me of your shoelaces. You know how you've got that little plastic thing on the end of your shoelace to keep the shoelace from unraveling? It's essentially what it did to the little cord. So it was perfect. And just putting a little bit of hot glue on the knot of the cord of the bow, and then securing that to the top of the wreath. And then when my love sign was all dry, I'm just going to put this right on the O around the heart-shaped cutout. And I'm going to secure that down. I was trying to figure out where exactly the wreath was touching the wood because it's not just a flat surface. So I got that all situated, and then I was able to kind of slide it to where I needed it while the hot glue was still drying, or not drying, but cooling. So got that all situated, and that's it. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 20.
All right, this is from the Dollar Tree. It comes in a pack of 6. They're little wooden slats, and then I've got that handle that I had mentioned I was going to be using. It's left over from that gift bag in the first project. And I'm going to kind of shape the handle, which makes me think of not like raffia. It's almost like a paper ribbon. I don't know how else to describe it, but I thought it was kind of cool and we would be able to do something with it. This is my Imperial chalk paint by Home Decor. I just gave the little square a good coat on both sides. And once it was dry, I started forming my little handle. You can see I kind of bent it in half in the middle there. Yeah, bent it in half in the middle. Oh geez. So I'm adding a teeny little bit of hot glue to the point there, and I'm just going to form it around in a heart shape. Just want to make sure that that is nice and cool before I start pulling on it. Added a little glue to the bottom. I'm going to add a little bit more so that I can bring the other piece down. And then I'll add a little bit of hot glue at the top of each of the little humps of the heart, just to make sure that the whole thing maintains the shape that I want it to have. This one was a little bit challenging to get in there, so I flipped it over and kind of tried to squish the hot glue in there. So forgive me for having it out of sight there as I did that. So once that's, oh, I'm going to put a little bit more hot glue there because it wasn't keeping the shape. So once that's done, I am grabbing a wooden heart from the Dollar Tree. I went ahead and squished that down, and then I thought, oh, you know what, this little bow and arrow thing, or heart and arrow, there's no bow, I thought that was sweet, so I'm going to go ahead and apply that on there. I had removed the little adhesive that was already on there because it was visible and I didn't like being able to see it. So just some hot glue, and that is done, but I want it to be able to stand on its own. So I grabbed a couple of little wooden beads from my stash, and I'm just going to position them towards the bottom and add some hot glue so that these can support the sign. So just adding a little bit of glue there, adhering it to the bottom, and now this will be able to stand on its own. Sweet little sign. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 21.
Okay, playing cards. These came from the Dollar Tree. They are jumbo playing cards. I've had them in my stash for quite some time, and I finally decided I was going to make something with them. I saw something online. I honestly have no idea where I saw it. It might have been on Pinterest, or I don't know. I tend to just Google stuff sometimes and images pop up and then I can't remember where I saw them. But I've got all of the hearts laid out in a heart shape. And then I decided I wanted the king and queen together somehow. So that's why I started rearranging things. And then I had the ace up there, but then I felt like the ace ended up getting hidden. So anyway, I just messed with this for a little while until I had it the way that I wanted it, with the cards, you know, again, looking the way that I thought that they looked best. and until I was satisfied. So here it is, the final decision on how I'm laying these out. And I just started gluing them down with my hot glue and just making sure that they all were still in the same, pattern, if you will, to create my heart shape. So just went through one at a time and glued them down. And once I had that all set, here, this is the last one, I decided to flip it over and just create more support for it, right? So here's the back side of it, and I'm going to glue the cards the opposite way now, right? So when you'd flip this back to the front, so you're seeing all of the heart cards, you will see the background of the red. Hopefully that makes sense, right? So I just wanted it to be a little bit thicker. I also wanted to define the shape of the heart a little bit more. So you can see I'm being pretty deliberate with where I am putting these. You don't have to make it quite so deliberate. You can make it much messier if you want and have more of a scattered look. That's just the way that I decided to do it. I wanted to kind of define the heart shape, and then on the front you'll have all of the heart cards for the little wall hanging, or I guess this could be considered a wreath if you wanted it to. So once I had my heart all created, I pulled out that white ribbon again and I fashioned a little hanger for it. So grabbed enough of sufficient to make a loop and tied off the ends. I actually created a bow I had in my head. That's why I made it a little bit longer. You were probably wondering when you saw that why I was making it so long, but I wanted to have the top part of the hanger be a cute little bow. So I had tied a knot there and made a bow, and now the little loop at the bottom there, I've got the whole thing flipped over again. I'm going to glue the loopy part to the back side of our little wall hanging. Put down a little bit of hot glue, just making sure that that's set in there. And then I added a whole bunch more hot glue just to make sure that it wasn't going to pull away from the project. But let me know what you think. Okay, everybody, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the projects, remember, give me a big thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know which one was your favorite. And until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.